Hello, welcome to yet another episode of PoliTalks, where today we will be discussing the far out but still relevant 2024 United States Senate elections. Now, ordinarily, this would be a situation similar to after the 2022 presidential election, when it was unclear which seats, what the general outlook of the Senate elections would be. A lot of it depended on national environment, and there was no, I would say, clear lean. The map was slightly more favorable to Democrats in 2022, although it certainly could have gone either way. 2024 is different. Looking at this map, even just the number of Democratic seats up compared to Republicans is really a showcase of how Democrats may well struggle this election. And in a worst case scenario, they could end up having less than 45 Senate seats or less in an absolute worst case scenario, which is absolutely astounding to me. And I just want to dive in here and explain why this is such an unfavorable map for Democrats. So we're starting with some context. Now, in 2018, Democrats also had a very unfavorable map, perhaps an even more unfavorable map than the one they have today, and that was because many Democrats had been elected in 2012 in heavily conservative states. Many of those were a result of the Republican Tea Party movement, which drove many moderates to either support the Democrats or even abstain for the election. And that's how Democrats were able to win in North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana, West Virginia, Montana, Ohio, Florida, states like this, where traditionally Republicans have been dominant, especially in recent cycles, but Democrats had been able to eke out a victory in 2012 due to a variety of factors. But in 2018, simply these tremendous partisan leans in these states caught up with Democrats, and they ended up losing 4 seats, 3 of them which were expected, and definitely Democrats should have no right to complain that they lost, because frankly, they were lucky to have them in the first place. Those are North Dakota, Missouri, and Indiana. 2 states that should have gone Republican but went Democrat, or I say should have, I really meant most people would expect them to, just on a surface level, and those are states where President Trump has won by over 10 points. In the case of West Virginia, it is literally one of the most Republican states in the nation, and yet a Democratic senator, Joe Manchin, has been elected from that state. And then they also lost Florida, which was an extremely close race, decided by around 0.1%. They really should not have lost that, Democrats, but they did. And I think that based on recent trends and leans, I do expect Florida to be a reasonably comfortable win for Rick Scott, the incumbent Republican senator there. But we'll simply now examine some of the other states that pose a major issue for Democrats. So, of course, we've got the 2 big ones, West Virginia and Montana, and these are 2 states where immediately you can see Democrats are in massive trouble. They are both solid Republican states and have been in the past presidential election, and the crazy thing is, Democrats could potentially lose the Senate if they only lose a net of 1 seat here. If a Republican president is elected, then the Republicans only need to net gain 1 seat in the Senate, and it is guaranteed that Republicans will be in control. And if they gain 2 seats net, it doesn't matter who's president, Republicans win control of the Senate. And why all this matters is, even if Democrats do phenomenally in 2024, they win the presidency again, they win the House, then they still have to contend with the Senate, because in the modern era of politics, a party needs all three components of the executive and legislature to really accomplish anything. And Democrats had that for the past 2 years. In the 2022, they kept the Senate, but they did lose the House narrowly, I might add, but that is a loss, and so they are not really going to accomplish anything that term. They got lucky because in the Congress before that, Democrats were actually very productive, although this Congress certainly will have much more of a focus on House Republicans. But like I said, assuming that Democrats win the presidency, which is certainly not a given, and assuming that they don't pick up any seats, which I think is relatively certain at this point, just based off these options. Their two best candidates, of course, are Texas and Florida, although both of those states are a little far-fetched for Democrats at the moment, so I don't expect them to win any seats, and that means they literally have to retain every other seat except for one to even get a 50-50 Senate majority. And that is simply a shocking fact that illustrates just how devastating these Senate elections might be to Democrats. And I'd say the most likely Democratic flip is in West Virginia, or flip to Republicans, because, of course, that state is heavily Republican. Joe Manchin was able to win in 2018, I think, because of the strong Democratic environment. I simply don't believe he'll be able to pull it off in 2024. That's not an impossibility, although I think it is quite unlikely. And then the other crazy thing is Democrats need, assuming they don't pick up a seat, which I mentioned earlier, they need to win one of either Montana, Ohio, or West Virginia. Or actually two of those. They need to win at least two. And Montana, I'd say, is certainly a possibility for Democrats, but I still, at this point, see it going to Republicans just based off the fact that Jon Tester, again, was elected narrowly in 2018 and really benefited from a strong Democrat-leaning environment. I think he has a potential to lose this race come 2024, and that would mean already Republicans control the Senate through an outright majority, but we're not done yet. We have Ohio, which went to President Trump by practically the same 8-point margin in the last two presidential elections, and went to the Republican senator this year by 7 points. And that was expected to be a very competitive race. In many ways, it was, although Democrats really could not be losing here by 7 points if they want to win come 2024. I also think that is that's a very hard stretch for Democrats, and I do expect them to lose it in 2024, which means that we're at 52-48 for Republicans, but we're not done yet. We have, and I quote, Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, to a degree Minnesota, and Pennsylvania. And those are essentially the swing states come 2024 that I really consider the most swing states, besides the three Republican-leaning states. And it could even get worse than that for Democrats, although I do not expect it to. So we'll just do a quick worst-case scenario for Democrats here. I will, of course, shade in all the safe rankings. New Mexico is most likely a likely state, although I mean, we've seen it in 2020. It was quite a close Senate election, so nothing is an absolute certainty at this point. Maine, I would also say, is likely. Same with New York. Virginia is likely, I believe. It's not a crazy possibility that Glenn Youngkin might run for Senate there. I don't believe he can run in 2023, as a matter of fact, because Virginia has a very unusual term limit law. And let's see what else we have. That is Hawaii, and that is actually pretty much it for Democrats. Minnesota, I will characterize as likely blue. And then Republicans have many, many safe states this election, a crazy number of safe states and likely states. It is a very alarming fact for Democrats. And so let's just do a worst case scenario here. I won't even bother to do the margins because this is just purely for imaginate. Oops, sorry. I mean, I suppose Minnesota could go to Republicans in the worst case scenario, but we're really trying to be realistic here. I don't think that's a very realistic possibility. But look at this 57 to 43 Republican seats. That is insane. Like, we have not had a margin that large since Barack Obama in 2008. And if Biden is elected president in 2024, and this is the outcome, then there is a very good chance that Democrats the Republicans win a filibuster-proof majority in 2026, and that would be from the uh, both Georgia runoffs. It could be from Arizona. This is a very alarming statistic for Democrats. Although, let's be realistic here. I highly doubt this will be the outcome. I think Democrats have the edge in Wisconsin. I think Tammy Baldwin is quite popular there if she does decide to run for re-election, which is certainly not a given. Debbie Stabenow of Michigan has already retired, and there may be more Democrats retiring in 2024, and that could prove the way for an absolutely brutal campaign for Democrats. Although the thing with Michigan is it's actually shown its blue tendencies quite a bit in the last few years. The state legislature became Democrat. The governor, of course, Democrats won an important house race there. Not fully blue. It's still definitely a swing state, but I do think both of these states will be lean. Pennsylvania, too. I think the incumbent there, Bob Casey, he was actually diagnosed with cancer recently, although it is expected to have a good prognosis. So I expect he will run again in the seat. And here we are, 46 to 54. That is still a terrible loss for Democrats, but it's not quite as insane as the 57 to 43 scenario. And if we're being liberal here, I do think Arizona will go to a Democrat. I think it will be very interesting. I think what will ultimately end up happening is Democrats will probably just see that Kyrsten Sinema, she cannot be bested here because if they run a challenger, I think there was a poll recently showing Carrie Lake could potentially win this. So I think Democrats will ultimately just have to suck it up and let Kyrsten Sinema continue to be a senator from Arizona. And then there is Nevada, which I also think, given the fact, I think Nevada has been kind of overstated in terms of its swing state nature. I mean, Republicans did win the governorship last year, last year. Yes, I'm correct in saying that. But I ultimately think on the Senate level, on the federal level, Nevada has not really, even in a negative environment for Democrats in 2022, it's really just not shown me it's a particularly Republican-leaning state. So I would actually characterize this as lean for the moment. And that puts us at 48 to 52, which is a respectable majority, but Democrats would not be absolutely screaming and crying if this happened. And I think it has a very great possibility of happening. If we're working upwards here to like a potential best case scenario for Democrats, I'd say Ohio. Also, just a quick note, I think this is pretty much my prediction for the 2024 race. If you're interested, I think this is ultimately how it will end up, potentially West Virginia even safe. Joe Manchin, I think, is in real trouble. And if he doesn't run, it's a done deal. Republicans will absolutely win if he doesn't run. I can't think of a single Democrat that could reverse that. So I'm going to keep it as likely. But moving on for my actual prediction, say Ohio, I think Democrats definitely have a chance in Ohio. I wouldn't say it's quite as hopeless as some of these other seats here. I mean, in 2022, you've got to give credit to Tim Ryan. He wasn't receiving much fundraising. He was widely expected to lose, and he did end up outperforming Donald Trump, and I think he had quite a respectable margin. And Sherrod Brown is the incumbent. I do expect he'll run again. And if Republicans nominate a candidate like Josh Mandel or someone similar to J.D. Vance, then I think this seat could end up flipping not flipping. Democrats would retain the seat. So that's actually not a bad result for Democrats. Of course, it's still a Republican majority, but they are only one seat away in 2022 from potentially reclaiming the majority, assuming they have won the presidency. And then the next state I'd say that might go to Democrats is Montana. This is a far fetch, but Montana has shown in the past it's not entirely partisan. 2018, the governor election, I think Montana has an odd governor schedule, but certainly Democrats have one here in the past, and I don't think it's the farthest fetched idea to say that this could go to Democrats. And that puts us at 50-50, which, of course, literally is a 50-50 depending on who wins the presidency. Although, even if Democrats got this margin, Kirsten Sinema in Arizona, who I think is the front runner in this race, assuming she runs, which I think she will likely stymie most of their agenda. But if they win the House and the presidency, this is probably what I can imagine is the best case for scenario for Democrats right now. If we're talking like absolute miracle night, then I suppose, assuming Republicans nominate someone, frankly, it would have to be on the caliber of Roy Moore, and I think Joe Manchin would. I think the smart strategy for Joe Manchin these next 2 years is because, of course, no Democratic policies are going to go through the House. I think it would be a smart idea for Manchin and actually the rest of the Democrats to agree to a plan where Democrats put forth, legislation, more partisan legislation, and then I think it would be a clever idea for Joe Manchin to vote down on every single piece of legislation, knowing it won't pass anyways. It's kind of like a statement, and then Republicans can't use that, and he can potentially advocate he's being more bipartisan. And in those scenarios, perhaps there's even I think West Virginia has a mountain party and like a libertarian. Maybe they split some of the votes. In an absolute miracle scenario for Democrats, they might narrowly pull ahead in West Virginia, although that is still almost beyond the realm of possibility at this point. So, yeah, my final prediction is 52 to. Sorry, I am way out of it today. Yes, my final prediction is 52 to 48 for Democrats, and I think this will be a very, very difficult race for Democrats, and we will have to see how it shapes up, because if for example, Ron DeSantis is on the ticket and energizes Republicans, we could potentially see a 57-seat Republican majority, and thinking of that, if we have 57 seats and Republicans have a House majority, that is essentially a massive platform for Ron DeSantis to essentially pass anything that, of course, he wouldn't easily be able to peel off 3 Democratic votes, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility to see how Republicans could really enact many policies of their own. This could be simply a pivotal election for Republicans, so we'll see how it shapes out, but that is my prediction for the 2024 United States Senate elections. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.